Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. What happens when a combat veteran who served her country in actual war zones sits down on a talk show expecting professional discourse, and instead finds herself facing a panel that's already convicted her as a traitor on national television? When a soldier who's risked her life for American freedom walks into a studio where hosts have spent weeks calling her a Russian asset, a useful idiot, a Trojan horse sent to destroy democracy. When someone who's dedicated her entire adult life to service finally says enough right there, live with cameras rolling and millions watching. What you're about to witness is the moment Tulsi Gabbard looked Joy Behar directly in the eye and refused to let the smear campaign continue unchallenged. This isn't a politician doing damage control or a celebrity managing controversy. This is a decorated veteran calling out character assassination in real time, dismantling accusations with precision that would make a military strategist proud, and reminding America what real patriotism looks like when it's been dragged through the mud by people who've never worn the uniform. Joy Behar thought she could control this conversation the way she controls every conversation on The View, with interruptions, diversions, and the comfortable backup of her co-hosts nodding along. She thought Tulsi would play defense, would shrink under the weight of Hillary Clinton's accusations, echoed and amplified by The View's platform. She thought wrong on every single count. This is the confrontation that The View didn't see coming. The moment when quiet strength met accusations and didn't blink. The interview where a combat veteran reminded television hosts that words have consequences, smears have targets, and not everyone will sit quietly while their character gets assassinated for ratings. Buckle up, because what unfolds isn't just great television. It's a masterclass in how truth delivered with military precision and backed by actual service can cut through propaganda like a knife through butter. Enjoy. Joy learned the hard way that there's a massive difference between attacking someone's politics and attacking someone's patriotism, especially when that someone has actually bled for this country while you've been sitting comfortably in a television studio making accusations you can't defend. The View studio glowed with its familiar bright lighting that morning, the set arranged in its standard configuration that had become iconic over decades of broadcast. The curved desk, the comfortable chairs, the carefully positioned cameras designed to capture every reaction, every gesture, every moment of what the producers hoped would be compelling television. The audience filled their seats with the usual excited energy that comes from being part of a live taping. Phones silenced, but ready for the moments they'd share later about being there when it happened. Joy Behar sat in her usual position at the table, surrounded by her co-hosts. All of them prepared with their talking points and prepared questions. They'd spent weeks discussing Tulsi Gabbard on this show, analyzing her positions, questioning her motives, amplifying Hillary Clinton's explosive accusations that had dominated news cycles. The narrative had been set, reinforced, repeated until it became accepted truth in certain circles. Tulsi Gabbard was somehow compromised, somehow suspicious, somehow not quite American enough despite her military service. Tulsi walked onto that set knowing exactly what she was walking into. This wasn't naive optimism or hope that somehow The View would treat her fairly despite weeks of character attacks. This was calculated strategy. A soldier who'd assessed the battlefield, understood the enemy's position, and decided to engage directly rather than let the accusations stand unchallenged. She wore professional attire that suggested serious conversation rather than entertainment, her posture upright and military straight, her expression pleasant but absolutely focused. The interview began with what should have been a straightforward political question about impeachment, the kind of softball that politicians field constantly. But Joy's tone carried something underneath the surface, a knowing quality, an edge that suggested she was already thinking about where this conversation was really going to go. Those watching closely might have noticed the slight smile playing at Joy's lips, the way her co-hosts exchanged glances that suggested they were all in on whatever was coming next. Tulsi wasn't interested in playing that game. Not today. Not after weeks of having her name dragged through mud by people who'd never put on a uniform, never deployed to a war zone, never faced down actual enemies of the United States while these television hosts faced down cameras and teleprompters. "Were you surprised by what he did yesterday?" Joy asked, referring to the political controversy of the moment. her voice carrying that television-trained enthusiasm that manages to sound engaged while actually being performative. "Well, look, the facts are important," Tulsi began. But she wasn't falling into the trap of answering the question Joy asked. She had her own agenda, her own mission objective, and we'll get to that. "I want to start with something that I think is also important about facts, because recently on your show here I was just going to get to that." Joy interrupted quickly, and there it was, the first sign that Joy knew exactly what was coming, and was already trying to control the narrative to steer the conversation on her terms rather than letting Tulsi speak her truth. "Good," Tulsi said with that slight smile that combat veterans get when they see through a tactic helping you out. The comment was surgical, polite on the surface, but absolutely clear in its meaning. "I know what you're doing and it's not going to work." Joy tried to maintain control with forced cheerfulness. "You want me to ask you the question?" But Tulsi was done with the dance, done with the deflections, done with letting other people control the narrative about her character and her service. "Look, some of you have accused me of being a traitor to my country," she said, her voice calm, but carrying unmistakable steel underneath. "A Russian asset, a Trojan horse, or a useful idiot, I think was the term that you used." The studio fell noticeably quieter. This wasn't following the script. This was a guest coming onto their show and immediately calling them out for behavior they'd probably convinced themselves was just political commentary rather than character assassination, which basically means that I'm naive or lack intelligence to know what's going on, Tulsi continued. And the way she broke down the insult, explaining what useful idiot actually means rather than letting it pass as vague terminology, was devastatingly effective. She was making them own their words, forcing them to confront exactly what they'd been saying about her. Joy shifted in her seat, that comfortable confidence wavering slightly. The other co-hosts looked uncertain, probably not expecting this level of directness, this refusal to play defense. "I want to let your viewers know exactly who I am," Tulsi said. And the shift in pronouns was significant. Not your viewers, putting distance between herself and the View's audience, but speaking directly to Americans watching at home who deserve truth rather than smears. "Set the record straight. I am a patriot. I love our country." Each declaration came with the weight of someone who'd proven these words through action rather than just speaking them into a microphone. This wasn't politician speak or carefully crafted messaging. This was someone who'd put their life on the line, speaking to people who'd put nothing on the line except their reputations. "I am a strong and intelligent woman of color," Tulsi continued. And that addition was crucial, calling out the hypocrisy of a supposedly progressive show attacking someone who checked every box they claimed to celebrate. "And I have dedicated almost my entire adult life to protecting the safety, security, and freedom of all Americans in this country." The audience was dead silent now. The kind of silence that comes from people recognizing they're witnessing something significant, something beyond the usual back and forth of political television. This was personal. This was about honor, service, sacrifice, concepts that don't translate well to a talk show format designed around hot takes and quick reactions. It was the attacks on 9/11. Tulsi started to explain her motivation for enlisting, but Joy couldn't let her finish. Couldn't let her establish that narrative without interruption. "Well, I guess we were getting a little bit far ahead of ourselves," Joy interjected with forced casualness, trying desperately to regain control of an interview that had already slipped entirely away from her. "But Franklin Graham finds you refreshing. He doesn't find me refreshing." The deflection was transparent instead of addressing the accusations Tulsi had just laid out. Joy was throwing out names of people who'd said positive things about Tulsi, as if that somehow proved something nefarious. It was guilt by association taken to absurd levels. "People I don't like support you. Therefore you must be suspect. Richard Spencer, the white nationalist leader, says he could vote for you," Joy continued. And the desperation in this line of attack was palpable. "You're responsible for everyone who supports you, even especially people whose support you've explicitly rejected." Tulsi tried to respond, but Joy was on a roll now, throwing out whatever mud she could find. "You're on Tucker Carlson at least 10 times. Why don't you go on Chris Wallace's show?" The question was designed to sound like legitimate media criticism, but was actually just another smear. "You appear on shows I don't approve of. Therefore you're compromised. The circular logic was dizzying. The View spends weeks calling you a Russian asset. You come on The View to defend yourself. And they use that appearance to suggest you only go on shows that are friendly to you. But Tulsi wasn't taking the bait. She wasn't going to let Joy control this narrative through deflection and distraction. Because you and other people continue to spread these innuendos that have nothing to do with who I am, she said. Her voice rising slightly with contained frustration. Not anger, not loss of control, but the justified emotion of someone who's been slandered and is finally getting the chance to respond. Well, Hillary started it, Joy said quickly, trying to distance herself from the accusations as if she'd merely been reporting on them rather than amplifying and endorsing them. And then you shot back at her. Boy, you called her the queen of warmongers. You doubled down, Tulsi said firmly, not letting Joy escape responsibility. Unfortunately, you doubled down on the baseless accusations that she made that strike at the core of who I am. Strike at the core of who I am. The words hung in the air, cutting through the studio noise and reaching into something deeper than politics. This wasn't about policy disagreements or political strategy. This was about identity, about service, about a veteran being told by comfortable television hosts that her patriotism was suspect. I'm a soldier, Tulsi continued. And those 3 words carried more weight than anything anyone else on that panel could claim. Because of the attacks on 9/11, I enlisted in the military to go after and defeat and destroy the evil that visited us on that day. Not I decided to run for office or I thought I could make a difference from Congress. She enlisted. She put on the uniform. She deployed to war zones while Joy Behar was hosting talk shows and making jokes for daytime television audiences. I've served now for over 16 years, Tulsi said. Each year a rebuttal to every casual accusation. Deployed twice to the Middle East during the height of the war, where every single day I saw firsthand the terribly high human cost. Every single day. While The View's hosts saw coffee cups and teleprompters, Tulsi Gabbard saw the cost of war measured in lives and blood and sacrifice. The contrast was so stark, it didn't need to be explicitly stated. Everyone watching understood the difference between these 2 types of experience. It's why I ran for Congress, Tulsi continued, connecting her military service directly to her political career in a way that made clear her motivations came from service rather than ambition. But Joy wasn't going to let the moment land without trying to regain control. We actually have the clip of Hillary Clinton just to put this in context, Joy said. And you could hear the relief in her voice, finally something she could show, something that would back up their position. Let's take a look at that. The screen filled with Hillary Clinton's image. Her voice crisp and confident as she delivered the accusation that had sparked this entire controversy. I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. The accusations were damning, delivered with the authority of someone who'd been Secretary of State, who'd run for president, who commanded respect and attention whenever she spoke. She was calling Tulsi a Russian asset without quite saying the words directly, political smearing with plausible deniability built in. I'm assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not because she's also a Russian asset, Hillary continued. And there it was, the explicit comparison, the direct accusation that anyone who disrupted democratic unity must be working for Moscow. As the clip ended, the implications hung heavy in the studio. This wasn't some fringe conspiracy theorist making accusations. This was Hillary Clinton using her massive platform and credibility to essentially call a sitting congresswoman and military veteran a traitor. And The View had amplified those accusations, given them additional reach, added their own commentary endorsing the suspicion. So really, I mean, this is outrageous, Tulsi said. And her voice carried genuine emotion now. Not hysteria, not performative anger, but real justified outrage at being publicly accused of treachery by people who'd never served anything but their own ambitions. This is outrageous and offensive on so many levels. She wasn't wrong. The accusations weren't about policy disagreements. Those happen constantly in politics and are legitimate grounds for debate. These accusations struck at something far more fundamental. Loyalty, patriotism, the suggestion that someone who'd worn the uniform and deployed to war zones was actually working for America's enemies. I've served as a member of Congress now for almost 7 years, Tulsi continued, methodically building her counterargument with facts rather than emotions. Receiving high-level national security and intelligence briefings, serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, working to ensure the safety and security of the people of this country. Each committee assignment was a rebuttal, each security briefing a counterargument. If she were truly a Russian asset, would she have security clearances? Would she be sitting on committees dealing with America's most sensitive national security issues? The logical holes in Hillary's accusations were massive, but they'd been ignored because the narrative was too useful, too politically convenient. This is, I'm running for president to continue that commitment of service, Tulsi said, bringing her argument full circle. Not running for power or attention, but to continue serving the same motivation that led her to enlist after 9/11. But Joy couldn't let it stand without pushback. So, are you surprised though that when people see bots and things and all the things that we've sort of been seeing heading your way that people have these questions? Because she's not the only one. Hillary, I don't think, is the only one. The phrasing was careful. People have these questions as if legitimate concern rather than coordinated smearing. Joy was trying to make it sound reasonable, like natural curiosity rather than deliberate character assassination. So, what she's saying is she feels they are grooming you, Joy continued, putting Hillary's accusations in softer language. You're saying nobody's grooming me. I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm a soldier and a patriot. It's offensive to me, Tulsi said. And her voice had that edge that combat veterans get when they're truly angry, but maintaining control. As a soldier, as an American, as a member of Congress, as a veteran, and frankly as a woman, to be so demeaned in such a way as a woman. The addition was pointed, calling out the hypocrisy of The View, a show that positioned itself as championing women's voices, participating in the demeaning of a woman who'd achieved more than most people dream of achieving. Well, I'm pointing to the fact that she has continued this legacy of being the world's police around the world, Tulsi said, shifting to substance, to the actual policy disagreements that should have been the focus, rather than questioning her loyalty that has waged wars costing the lives of thousands of my brothers and sisters in uniform. Brothers and sisters in uniform. Not abstract statistics or political talking points, but real people Tulsi had served alongside. People whose lives were lost pursuing the interventionist foreign policy that Hillary Clinton had championed throughout her career. I'm speaking out against that, Tulsi continued. And Joy tried to interrupt, but Tulsi kept going. Are you serious? Are you serious? Tulsi's voice rose with genuine incredulity at whatever Joy had tried to say. Let's hear it, Joy said defensively. I served in the war in Iraq that she championed, Tulsi said. And the accusation landed like a bomb. She championed a regime change war. Did you serve in that war? I believed the lies that were told to us. The personal nature of the attack was devastating. You championed a war that sent me to fight. You made the decisions from safety while I faced the consequences in a war zone. And now you question my loyalty. Well, so did she, Joy said quickly, trying to defend Hillary by suggesting she was also deceived. It is indisputable, Tulsi said, her voice firm and brooking no argument. It is indisputable to say anything other than the fact that Hillary, let me just close this out, that Hillary Clinton throughout her career has led with a foreign policy of interventionism and being the world's police, going and toppling dictators in other countries that has caused such destruction and loss of life. She was connecting the dots explicitly. And now Hillary Clinton's foreign policy record, her support for military interventions, her role in decisions that cost American lives. And now that same person was questioning the patriotism of someone who'd actually fought in the wars she supported. I'm against that, Tulsi said simply. I'm running for president to change that. Rather than actually debate me on the issues, she and others are resorting to these smear tactic campaigns, seeking to undermine me, smear my character, and sending a message to anyone who dissents. Toe the line or you too will be smeared. There it was. The real accusation, the actual conspiracy that was happening in plain sight. Not a Russian conspiracy to install Tulsi Gabbard in the White House, but a political establishment conspiracy to destroy anyone who challenged their foreign policy orthodoxy. Disagree with endless wars. You must be a Russian asset. Question military intervention. You're a useful idiot. Challenge the establishment. You're a traitor. The audience sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't the usual View interview where hosts control the narrative and guests play along. This was a decorated combat veteran systematically dismantling a smear campaign while the people who'd participated in that campaign sat feet away, unable to mount an effective defense. Joy looked visibly uncomfortable, her co-hosts shifting in their seats. They'd expected defensiveness, maybe some carefully worded denials. What they got instead was a full-throated offense. A point-by-point demolition of their accusations, backed by actual service and sacrifice that none of them could match. The brilliance of Tulsi's confrontation was in its structure. She hadn't come on the show to apologize or explain herself in ways that accepted the premise of the accusations. She came to flip the script entirely to make Joy and The View defend their participation in spreading baseless smears. She put them on trial in their own studio, using their own platform to expose the hollowness of their attacks. How dare you, she might as well have said, though she was too disciplined to phrase it quite that directly. How dare comfortable television hosts question the loyalty of someone who volunteered to fight after 9/11? How dare people who've never worn the uniform suggest that someone who deployed twice to combat zones is working for our enemies? How dare political partisans attack someone's fundamental identity rather than engaging with their actual arguments? The policy disagreements were legitimate grounds for debate. Should America be the world's police? What role should military intervention play in foreign policy? How do we balance security with avoiding endless wars? Those were real questions deserving serious discussion. But instead of having that discussion, Hillary Clinton and Joy Behar and others had chosen character assassination, had decided that Tulsi's actual arguments were too dangerous to engage with directly, so they'd attack her motives instead. And Tulsi had just demonstrated in real time on national television exactly why that strategy fails when the person being smeared actually has a record of service that speaks louder than any accusations. She didn't need to prove she wasn't a Russian asset. Her entire life proved it. Her military service proved it. Her committee assignments proved it. Her security clearances proved it. Everything about her record contradicted the smear. And she just laid all of that out in ways that The View couldn't refute. Joy's attempts to redirect the conversation, to soften Hillary's accusations, to suggest that the concerns were legitimate rather than political hit jobs, all of it fell flat in the face of Tulsi's directness. You can't both sides in accusation of treason. You can't suggest someone has questions to answer when you're accusing them of being an enemy agent. Either you have evidence or you're engaged in slander. And Joy had no evidence beyond guilt by association and discomfort with Tulsi's foreign policy positions. The contrast between Tulsi's specific rebuttals citing her service record, her deployments, her committee work, her security clearances, and The View's vague insinuations about bots and Russian support was stark. One side brought receipts. The other brought innuendo. One side had actually served. The other had talked about service from comfortable studios. As the segment continued and eventually ended, it was clear to anyone watching who had won this confrontation. Tulsi had walked into what was essentially hostile territory and not only defended herself, but gone on offense, forcing The View to confront their own role in spreading smears. She'd used their platform against them, turning what they'd probably hoped would be a chance to further question her loyalty into a showcase for why questioning her loyalty was absurd in the first place. Joy tried to maintain her composure to act like this was just normal political discussion rather than the dressing down it actually was. But the discomfort was visible, the recognition that they'd made a mistake in assuming Tulsi would play defense, that she'd shrink under pressure rather than confronting it directly. What made this confrontation particularly effective was Tulsi's refusal to accept the framing that she was the one with something to prove. She didn't come on The View to convince them she wasn't a Russian asset that would accept the premise that the accusation was legitimate enough to require defending against. Instead, she came to hold them accountable for spreading the accusation, to put the burden where it belonged, on the people making extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. This is what separates effective pushback from ineffective whining. Tulsi didn't complain about being treated unfairly. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't play victim. She simply stated facts about her service and forced the View to reconcile those facts with their accusations. The cognitive dissonance was too great. You can't simultaneously believe someone is a Russian asset and acknowledge that they have high-level security clearances. You can't claim someone is unpatriotic while they list their deployments to war zones. You can't question someone's loyalty when their entire adult life has been spent in service. The audience at home watching this unfold saw something rare on television. Someone refusing to play by the rules of political discourse that say you must treat all accusations as worthy of serious response. Tulsi recognized that some accusations, particularly accusations of treason coming from political opponents, don't deserve dignified response so much as they deserve to be thrown back in the face of the people making them. Joy's discomfort throughout the segment spoke volumes. She'd probably hosted thousands of interviews, handled controversial guests, navigated difficult conversations. But this was different. This wasn't a politician she could interrupt or talking point she could counter with her own talking points. This was someone who'd actually done the things the View claimed to admire, served in uniform, fought for her country, sacrificed personal comfort and safety for a larger cause. And that person was now telling them directly that their accusations were not just wrong but offensive. The View had made a calculation that Tulsi was fair game for these kinds of attacks because she'd departed from Democratic Party orthodoxy on foreign policy. They'd assumed that someone who criticized Hillary Clinton and questioned endless military interventions must be either naive or compromised. What they hadn't counted on was that Tulsi would refuse to accept that framing, would come into their studio and prosecute the case against them rather than defending herself against their prosecution. This confrontation became a masterclass in how to handle smears not through careful spin or political calculation, but through direct confrontation backed by an unassailable record of service. Every time Joy tried to soften the accusations or suggest they were just asking questions, Tulsi brought it back to the fundamental reality. You accused me of being a traitor and I'm a combat veteran. Those two things cannot coexist. So either admit your accusation was wrong or defend it with evidence. The View had no evidence. They had Hillary Clinton's suspicions, some vague concerns about online bots, and discomfort with Tulsi's foreign policy positions. None of that came close to justifying accusations that someone with 16 years of military service, including 2 combat deployments, was working for Russia. As the interview concluded and Tulsi left the set, the impact of what had just happened began to sink in for viewers across the political spectrum. People who disagreed with Tulsi's politics found themselves admiring her courage and confronting the smears directly. People who'd believed the accusations found themselves with questions about why the View couldn't effectively defend them when challenged. And people who'd been defending Tulsi all along felt vindicated watching her dismantle the narrative in real time. The confrontation demonstrated something important about modern political discourse. Smears work best when the target doesn't fight back effectively. The View had gotten away with amplifying Hillary's accusations because Tulsi hadn't had a platform to respond directly. Once, she was in the same room looking Joy in the eye, laying out her service record point by point. The accusations collapsed under their own weight. Joy Behar had thought she could control this interview the way she controlled every interview on The View. She thought Tulsi would be just another political guest, easily interrupted, easily dismissed, easily boxed into defensive positions. What she discovered instead was that combat veterans who've actually faced real enemies aren't easily intimidated by talk show hosts playing gotcha games. The lesson wasn't just for Joy or The View, but for the entire media ecosystem that had participated in spreading doubts about Tulsi's loyalty. When you accuse someone of treason, you better have evidence. When you question someone's patriotism, you better have a record that matches or exceeds theirs. And when you invite that person onto your show, expecting them to meekly accept your framing, you better be prepared for the possibility that they'll reject your premise entirely and put you on trial instead. Tulsi Gabbard walked into The View that day and did something that political consultants would probably have advised against. She confronted her accusers directly, forcefully, and without apology. She didn't try to find middle ground or common understanding. She didn't accept that there were legitimate questions about her loyalty. She simply laid out who she was, what she'd done, and why the accusations against her were not just wrong but offensive. And Behar, along with the rest of The View, had no effective response. Because when someone's life speaks louder than any words, when someone's service record contradicts your accusations, when someone's willingness to confront you directly reveals the weakness of your position, you can try to interrupt. You can try to deflect. You can try to maintain your composure, but everyone watching knows who won the confrontation. That's the power of truth backed by service. That's what happens when you attack someone's character and they refuse to let it stand. That's the moment when comfortable accusations meet uncomfortable reality, and reality wins every single time. The View thought they were hosting another political interview. What they actually did was provide the platform for Tulsi Gabbard to expose how hollow their accusations were, how baseless their suspicions, how offensive their willingness to question the loyalty of someone who'd served while they'd sat in studios judging from safety. It was a confrontation The View lost before it began. They just didn't know it until Tulsi Gabbard walked through their door and reminded them what real courage looks like. Not the courage to make accusations from safety, but the courage to face those accusations directly and dismantle them with the truth.